Hello, everyone. It's George from Ireland. Well, welcome back to the channel. So, ceasefire has been signed in the Russo-Ukrainian war. Not total ceasefires. The first one only relating to energy infrastructure, supposedly mediated by the United States. Now, why would the US be the honest broker? The United States is an ally of Ukraine, not Russia. So it says much of the American position has shifted in just over 2 months since President Trump was re-inaugurated. Which side is he on? It's not clear, perhaps even to him, who was demanding all these concessions from Ukraine, demanding none from the aggressor. But obviously, it shouldn't surprise you to take the side of Putin. Trump is, of course, a convicted criminal, and he's someone who was proven in court to have sexually abused a woman. So no doubt he has a certain fellow feeling for Vladimir Putin, whose soldiers have committed rape on a large scale in Ukraine. He will always blame the victim and take the side of the perpetrator. So Russia's quite keen on this energy infrastructure ceasefire because the Russians were hitting them where it hurts in the oil refineries. Putin doesn't give a damn by his people. About 220,000 of his troops killed since the war began in 2022, and that's a low estimate, excluding those who were killed in the 8 years running up to that, as well as obviously, plenty of Ukrainian troops killed, tens of thousands of Ukrainian civilians murdered. I use the word advisedly, murdered, deliberately killed, knowing them to be civilians. So Putin really wants his oil and gas infrastructure to be left alone because obviously the cruciality of that to his war economy can scarcely be overstated. Now, Ukraine would like this gone because its electricity grid, power stations, so on, will continually hit. Not such a problem now as we're more or less in spring, but they would always like to rebuild as much as possible for next winter. The other thing is obviously the trains operate on that, and they're vital for military logistics. But then the Black Sea, they both export grain and so on. Russia exported plundered Ukrainian grain. Nothing was done to penalize those who knew they were buying stolen property, and so on. But Russia's been breaking it straight away. There have been summaries of the content of the meeting from both the United States and the Russian Federation, and surprise, surprise, they don't match. The one about stopping strikes on anything at sea, both military vessels and civilian craft, the Russians say yes, but that is contingent upon lifting sanctions on Russia. Well, the USA didn't say anything about that, so just inventing conditions afterwards. So you know that the Russian government will lie and lie and lie, tell the most blatant, barefaced lies, shamelessly, unblushingly lying. Most people try not to lie, only lie when unavoidable, tell lies as close to the truth as possible that they think they can get away with. Half truth, something like that. There's only one government in the world that I know that will argue that up is down. You know, that the massive military buildup on Ukraine's border was no threat to anyone, that the war is not a war. There's a special military operation, that Ukraine started the war against Russia, lie after lie after lie after lie, that no Russian conscripts were sent to the war. I mean, it's just endless. My goodness. And obviously, Putin has got Trump to swallow some of these lies, but so it goes on. Now, it says much about Trump's total ignorance and his staggering stupidity that he trusts Putin, because of course Putin has been here before. There have been loads of ceasefires signed since 2014. There have been also Minsk One, Minsk Two agreement, and Russia's broken every single one, broken every single agreement really ever signed, particularly since the end of the Cold War. So the only thing that would actually win the war for Ukraine is massive ramping up of arms shipments, more stringent sanctions, but they show no appetite to do that because carrying on the Biden trajectory was looking like a draw, kind of. Okay, Ukraine was holding most of its territory, but not giving them the edge to make the war so painful for Russia that they pulled out, very least to make it a frozen conflict. And so it goes on. So right, so there've been all these attacks, oil refineries, oil and gas pipeline storage facilities, nuclear plants, hydroelectric plants, electricity generation transmission infrastructure not to be hit, and so on. But Russia really wants the sanctions on banks to be removed. It wants to access SWIFT, which allows you to send and receive money all around the globe. They want to be able to sell more food and fertilizers abroad. Potash was a fairly major export, as Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia is lying about the content of this already. So anyway, it's pointed out that Russia never honors its promises. I'm afraid the Russian government is utterly dishonorable. So it's quite dispiriting. Now, obviously, I would like a complete end to the war and Russia to withdraw unconditionally. But if you can't get that, get something close to that as possible. A ceasefire might be good now. So exporting grain via the Black Sea was important for food security, particularly in the global South. I remember the Black Sea Grain Initiative came in the summer of 2022, only a few months into the war, and they sold grain to Turkey, Syria, India, Pakistan, but particularly countries in Africa like Egypt, Eritrea, various other countries, some rather impoverished countries. But Russia ended that, so much for caring about the global South, because they weren't having sanctions. And then the Russian government will tell another flagrant lie that sanctions don't hurt them. So why are they so desperate to have sanctions lifted? Because it does hurt them, because it caused massive losses to some companies, and others are still in profit, but the profit is much lower than it was before. So there were these Riyadh talks between the United States and Russia. So remember, the US was pushing for a 30-day ceasefire on land, sea, and air, and didn't get there. So the Ukrainians and the Russians not speaking to each other directly, the Americans acting as intermediaries. But as Tulsi Gabbard, the director of U.S. National Intelligence, even she said that Russia remains the major threat, and she's really someone who's been a Putin apologist all the time. So it's very worrying that someone who's got such cognitive dysfunction as President Trump is there in the White House. So yeah, the Russians breaking this, they always do, and they probably accuse the other side of breaking it. But obviously, if Russia breaks it, you might let one or two things go, but eventually you're going to have to riposte Ukraine, and that'll be all over. Like the 30-day ceasefire, Russia was saying, well, only if you stop all arms shipments to Ukraine, but that will obviously really disadvantage the Ukrainians who need the arms shipments to get going. And for a real ceasefire, the Russians are saying we not only have to recognize the land we illegally occupy, have to permit us to advance deeper into Ukraine and seize even more territory. If any country should be demilitarized, it's Russia, not Ukraine. Russia, which is hyper aggressive, already illegally occupying the territory of 3 other sovereign states, completely unjustifiably ruled to be illegal by the International Court of Justice, on which Russia and indeed China have judges. So it's all quite troubling. I wish the war would end now. Obviously, I'm not remotely Russophobic. They're very good Russian people. There'll be some bad Ukrainian people. There's good and bad in every nation. And people get duped by propaganda, and people have doubts about what the government is doing, or even realize it's wrong, but say, my country, right or wrong. So it's all very dispiriting, and it's all down to Putin and his coterie. Thank you for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon and donate PayPal, George Callahan 79 at gmail.com. Goodbye.